They say blood calls to blood, but what if the echo it answers isn't your own? In a quiet corner of North Carolina, two sisters were born beneath the same roof, at the same hour, under a storm that split the sky clean in half. Locals whispered it was a bad omen. Two souls too close, bound too tight, destined for something unnatural. They were mirror images, identical in every way. Except for one thing, the secret they would carry into adulthood would make them strangers in each other's lives, and enemies in each other's skin. The story of the Carter twins never made the headlines. It wasn't written in any newspaper, or spoken about at the town's annual gatherings. But if you drive far enough down Highway 74, past the abandoned cotton mills and the church that lost its cross, you'll find a farmhouse that doesn't look quite right. Windows sealed from the inside, curtains drawn for years, and if you ask anyone old enough to remember, they'll lower their voice, lean in, and say, "That's where the switch happened." The nobody knows when it started. Only that by the time the twins were 13, one of them wasn't herself anymore. There were subtle signs. First, the wrong handwriting in a diary, a scar that disappeared overnight, a mother's name said with hesitation, as if trying it on for size. Then, one day, their father locked the door to the basement, and neither sister came out the same. The police would call it a family tragedy. The neighbors would call it the curse of the twins. But behind every polite phrase was a truth so twisted, no one dared to speak it aloud. Because what the Carter girls did to each other wasn't murder. It wasn't madness. It was something far colder, something deliberate. Some say the switch was planned years in advance. Others say one of them never existed at all. But the truth, the real truth, was found only after the old house was torn down and what was buried under the floorboards was finally pulled into the light. They were born without warning, too early, too small. The doctor later said it was a miracle either survived. Their mother, a quiet woman named Lillian Carter, swore she could tell them apart by their cries, one sharp and angry, the other soft and trembling, almost apologetic. But to everyone else, they were perfect reflections, two shadows moving in perfect rhythm. As they grew, their bond became something people whispered about. They spoke their own language, finished each other's sentences, even seemed to share dreams. Teachers at the small county school would find them standing in the hallway before class, holding hands, staring at something only they could see. The other children avoided them. It wasn't fear at first, just unease. There was something too precise about them, something wrong in their sameness. Lillian tried to raise them like normal girls. Church on Sundays, chores after school, bedtime prayers whispered by candlelight when the power went out. But her husband Raymond saw things differently. He told neighbors that twins were natural, that God didn't mean for two souls to come from one seed. He started keeping them apart, making one eat in the kitchen while the other ate alone in her room. He said it was to teach them independence. But Lillian would find bruises on their wrists, like they'd been held too tight. By the time the twins were 8, something had changed. One of them, Evelyn, grew quiet, withdrawn. The other, Elsie, started to smile in ways that made their mother's skin crawl. There was a cruelty in it, a satisfaction. Once Lillian caught Elsie whispering to her sister in the dark, repeating her words like an echo that came a second too late. Then came the night of the storm. A blackout swallowed the house. The girls disappeared from their rooms. When the lights came back, only one twin was found sitting in the corner, soaked to the bone, holding her sister's ribbon. When Lillian asked which one she was, the girl only smiled and said, "I don't remember." From that night on, she was different. Her voice, her habits, even her handwriting. Lillian tried to convince herself that trauma can change a child, but deep down she knew one of her daughters had vanished, and the one who remained might not be the one she'd loved. Lillian stopped sleeping after that night. She'd wake to footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing and counting the floorboards. She'd hear the whisper of two voices when there should have been one. At first, she thought it was grief, that her mind was trying to fill the silence her missing daughter left behind. But the noises didn't stop. They grew clearer, sharper. Sometimes she'd find the girl sitting in the living room long after midnight, humming a tune that wasn't hers. "Elsie," Lillian would ask. The girl would tilt her head, smile faintly and answer, "Don't you mean Evelyn?" It was small things at first. The way she held her spoon in the wrong hand. The way she'd forget names she should have known. But then came the diary. Lillian found it under the loose board in the floor. Childish handwriting, shaky and desperate. She wants to take my place, one entry read. She says I don't deserve to be here anymore. The next pages were blank, except for a single message pressed so hard into the paper it tore through. If you find this, it's already too late. Lillian showed it to her husband, but Raymond only laughed. Girls make up stories, he said, especially ones craving attention. But soon after, he started to notice things too. A reflection in the window that didn't match the girl's movements, a voice answering from behind a closed door when the girl was standing beside him. He started locking his tools away, started sleeping with the lights on. Then came the incident with the photographs. The family kept a small album, birthdays, holidays, church picnics. When Lillian opened it one morning, every picture of the twins had been altered, faces scratched out. Sometimes only one girl remained, sometimes none. And in one photo, one that had always shown the girls holding hands by the old willow tree, there was now just a single figure, smiling wide, her twin's shadow faint behind her, fading into the grass. That was when Lillian realized something no mother should ever have to face. She didn't know who her child was anymore, and the girl who called her Mama might have been practicing. Lillian tried to find help, but no one believed her. The preacher said the house carried a spirit of confusion, that grief can make demons out of shadows. The local doctor gave her sleeping pills and told her to rest. Even her own husband started to look at her with the same pity the neighbors did. But it wasn't Lillian who was losing her mind. It was the house itself, shifting around her, as if trying to erase its own history. The locked basement door began to rattle at night, even though no one ever went down there anymore. Once, she woke to the smell of dirt, wet and metallic, filling the air. She followed it down the hall and found the girl standing at the top of the basement stairs, her nightdress streaked with mud. When Lillian asked what she was doing, the girl only said she wanted to see the dark again. The next morning, Lillian found footprints, 2 sets, leading from the cellar to the kitchen sink. Small, bare, identical. From that point on, the girl refused to answer to either name. Sometimes she'd be Evelyn, shy and trembling. Other times she'd be Elsie, laughing at things no one else could hear. Her voice would shift mid-sentence, her eyes flickering like a dying light bulb. The neighbors noticed too. They'd see her standing in the yard for hours, just staring at the woods, lips moving soundlessly. One of them, old Mrs. Danner, swore she saw 2 girls that day. One watching, one hiding behind her. Raymond finally nailed the basement door shut. He said it was for their safety, but Lillian could tell he was afraid. He started drinking heavily, spending nights in the barn instead of the house. "You're letting her fool you," he told Lillian. "She's playing a game and you're falling for it." But one night, after another argument, he went missing. His truck was still in the driveway. His boots were by the door. The only thing gone was his flashlight, and the sound that came from beneath the floorboards when the sun went down. 3 days later, the girl came into the kitchen humming softly, holding something in her hands. It was Raymond's watch, still ticking. When Lillian asked where she found it, the girl said, "He wanted me to keep it. He doesn't need it where he's going." And then, smiling faintly, she added, "Now there's only room for one of us." Lillian stopped asking questions after that. Something in her had broken. The house, once filled with music and prayer, became a mausoleum of silence. She boarded up the windows, burned the photographs, and started calling the girl Child, instead of by name, afraid that saying either name might summon the wrong one. But the girl didn't seem to notice. She spent her days wandering from room to room, touching walls, tracing her fingers along the places her father's tools once hung. Sometimes, Lillian would catch her talking softly to the corners of the room, as if someone unseen was answering back, and every night, before bed, she would whisper, "Good night, sister," into the dark. Then came the letters. They began appearing on the porch in the early spring, faded envelopes with no stamps, no return address. Inside were short notes written in a child's hand. "I miss you. She says you're not real. Don't let her win." Lillian tried to dismiss them. Maybe a cruel prank, maybe her mind playing tricks. But the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Evelyn's. She burned the first few letters, but they kept coming. And with each one, the voice of the girl in the house changed. Her tone softened. She began to cry at night, whispering apologies to the walls. Once, Lillian found her in front of the mirror, clawing at her reflection, screaming, "I'm the real one!" until her throat went raw. That was when Lillian decided to open the basement again. She waited until the girl was asleep, pried the nails loose with a crowbar, and pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Rotten soil, heavy and damp. Her flashlight beam caught something pale at the bottom of the stairs. A hand, small, delicate, half buried in the dirt. Lillian fell to her knees. The body was curled in on itself, bones brittle, ribbons still tied around the wrists. And beside it, scratched into the concrete with something sharp, were 3 words, "She took me." Lillian didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared until her flashlight went out. And in the darkness, she heard a soft, familiar voice behind her say, "I told you, I'm Evelyn." If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if this was your bloodline? When the police arrived, Lillian was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. Her hair was streaked with dirt, her face gray with shock. The girl sat opposite her, silent, eyes wide and unblinking, wearing her sister's ribbon in her hair. The sheriff took one look at the basement and ordered the whole place sealed off. He said it was a tragic accident, that one twin must have fallen, and the other too traumatized to speak. But even as he said it, his voice shook. There was no sign of a fall, no sign of struggle, just a shallow grave and claw marks on the inside of the basement wall. When they asked the girl her name, she hesitated before whispering, "Evelyn." The sheriff nodded, satisfied, and wrote it down. But Lillian saw the faintest smile flicker across her daughter's face. The same smile Elsie used to wear when she got away with something. That was when Lillian realized the nightmare wasn't over. It had just learned to pretend. In the weeks that followed, the town pitied them. They brought casseroles, flowers, kind words. No one spoke about the body. The papers called it the Carter family tragedy. Lillian was never charged, but she couldn't live there anymore. She sold the farm for almost nothing and moved 3 counties away, taking the girl with her. They said it was a fresh start, but fresh starts don't erase what's buried. The girl grew quieter with each passing year. She avoided mirrors, refused to celebrate her birthday, and never spoke about her sister again. Yet sometimes in her sleep, she would mutter a name, over and over, until her voice broke. Lillian tried to pray it away, to believe that whatever evil had lived in that house was gone. But one winter night, she woke to find her daughter standing by the window, staring out into the snow. "There's 2 sets of footprints," she whispered. Lillian's heart stopped. She looked outside and saw them, 2 trails leading from the tree line to the porch, both small, both barefoot, and when she turned back, the girl was gone. Only the open door remained, snow drifting in across the floor. By morning, all that was left were the footprints, one set leading out into the woods, and another leading back inside, stopping right where Lillian stood. The police searched for days, combing through the frozen woods until the dogs refused to keep moving. They found no body, no torn clothes, no blood, just silence, that heavy, watching kind of silence that makes the wind sound wrong. They told Lillian to go home, to rest, to accept that her daughter had wandered off into the snow. But she didn't believe that. Not for a second. For weeks she stayed awake by the window, waiting for a sign. Some nights, she swore she saw a figure standing between the trees, just beyond the reach of the porch light. Sometimes it was tall, sometimes small, the shape never quite the same. And always, when she blinked, it was gone. Months passed. Lillian aged in ways the mirror couldn't capture. Her hair went white, her eyes hollowed, but she refused to leave that house. The neighbors stopped visiting. Even the mailman started leaving letters at the road instead of the porch. They said she'd gone mad, that she talked to herself, sometimes to the shadows on the walls. They said she still set a plate for her daughter every night, whispering grace to the empty chair. Then one spring, something changed. A new family moved into the old Carter farmhouse. Young couple, 2 children. They didn't know the story. No one told them. Lillian found out from the paper, saw their smiling faces holding a CLD sign in front of the place where her life had ended. She tried to warn them. She drove back to that county, to that road. But when she got there, the house looked wrong, the boards clean, the windows open, the air almost too still. The young mother came to the door, polite but uneasy, and when Lillian tried to speak, her voice trembled. "Do you ever hear footsteps at night?" she asked. "Do the girls ever talk to someone who isn't there?" The woman's face drained of color. Slowly, she nodded. "They say they have a friend," she whispered. "A sister who lives in the walls." That was when Lillian looked past her, into the dim hallway, and saw two little girls standing hand in hand. One smiling shyly, the other staring straight at her, eyes dark, unblinking, and far too old for her face. And from the darkness between them came a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Don't worry, Mama, she's not gone. She just learned how to stay." Lillian never returned to that house again. She moved into a small apartment above a grocery store in a town that didn't know her name. Every night, she locked her doors, checked her windows, whispered prayers that felt empty in her mouth. But some things follow you whether you speak their name or not. It started with the smell, damp earth and old wood, the scent of the basement she'd tried to forget. Then came the tapping, soft at first, from the walls behind her bed. She'd tell herself it was the pipes, the wind, anything but what it really was. But then one night, she heard it clear as breath against her ear. "You picked the wrong one," she screamed. The neighbors found her sitting upright in bed, trembling, unable to explain. They said she was just an old woman haunted by guilt. They didn't see the small footprints in the dust beneath the window. Over the years, rumors began to spread again. Quiet, local whispers that carried down county lines. People said if you drove past the old Carter farmhouse at night, you could see twin girls standing by the willow tree. Others said they'd seen one girl calling for her mother, while another watched from the second floor window, smiling. The new family didn't last long. They left in the middle of the night, taking only what they could fit in their car. They told the sheriff their daughters wouldn't sleep, that they'd wake up in different clothes than they went to bed in. One morning, they found both girls standing outside, barefoot, holding hands, staring at the ground where the basement had once been. They dug a hole with their bare fingers, whispering, "She's almost out." After that, the house sat empty again. The county tried to sell it, then to demolish it. But every contractor who took the job quit after a day. One said he heard a voice humming under the floor. Another said the foundation wasn't right, that it shifted subtly, as if the house itself was breathing. Lillian died in 1972. When the coroner found her, her face was peaceful, eyes closed. But there was something strange about her hands. They were clasped tightly together, as though holding someone else's. And between her fingers, pressed deep into her skin, were two small ribbons, one pink, one blue. At her funeral, only 5 people came. The priest spoke briefly, reading from a passage about forgiveness and release, but his voice faltered halfway through. He'd never known Lillian personally, but the undertaker told him strange things about her last days. How she'd whisper to someone unseen, how she'd wake with bruises on her wrists like a child had been holding her hand too tight. They buried her beside an unmarked grave. The cemetery workers didn't know it was her daughter's resting place, or at least one of them. No headstone, no flowers, just soil that never seemed to settle. Years passed. The story of the Carter twins faded into a kind of rural folklore, something people told in hushed tones at gas stations or over coffee in the morning. But every few decades, someone new would move into that county, into a house nearby, and the whispers would begin again. They'd say the old willow tree still weeps even when there's no wind. That if you press your ear against the earth beneath it, you can hear 2 voices, one pleading softly, the other laughing. And sometimes, when fog rolls off the river at dawn, you can see 2 figures standing in the mist, one in white, one in gray. Both motionless, both waiting. A researcher once came through, decades later, a historian collecting unsolved family stories of the South. He tracked down what records were left: birth certificates, school photos, a police report that had gone missing and reappeared years later in a box of unrelated evidence. The file was thin, water-damaged, but one note caught his attention, written in the sheriff's handwriting the day the basement was discovered. It said only one twin listed on file since 1948. Other records scratched out by parent, unsure which name is correct. He dug deeper. Census documents listed both girls until the year they turned 13. After that, only one remained, with alternating names across state lines. Sometimes she was Elsie, sometimes Evelyn, sometimes both crossed out, replaced with a single word written in red unknown. The historian published his findings in a small journal, but few believed it. They said it was just local legend, an exaggeration born of grief and madness. But one reader, an old nurse from the county hospital, sent him a letter a few weeks later. It said only this: the mother wasn't mad. I saw both girls in the ward that night, but only one had a pulse. The historian couldn't let it go. That letter became an obsession, a thread he couldn't stop pulling, even as everything around it began to unravel. He returned to the town, decades after the events, hoping to find someone, anyone, who still remembered. Most of the old families were gone. Those who remained claimed not to know anything, but behind their silence was fear, the kind that settles deep in the bones. He found the Carter farmhouse easily. The county had failed to sell it for years. It stood alone, hollow and leaning, wrapped in vines. The willow tree beside it was blackened and dead, though its roots still pulsed through the ground like veins. The front door hung open. Inside, dust and rot swallowed everything. Wallpaper peeled like skin. And on the floor, half buried in dirt, lay a child's ribbon, pink, faded, tied in a knot so tight it looked painful. The historian picked it up, and that's when he heard it. Faint, but clear. A hum, a girl's voice, echoing through the house, singing something old, something broken. He froze. It was coming from below, the basement. He forced the door open. The hinges groaned. The smell hit him instantly. Damp, mold, and something sweetly rotten. His flashlight trembled in his hand as he descended. The beam caught carvings on the wall, words etched deep into the concrete, over and over in the same handwriting: "She took me. She took me. She took me." And beneath those words, a single new phrase, written in what looked like rust but smelled of iron: "Now she's free." The sound grew louder. Two voices now, weaving together, one crying, the other laughing. He stumbled backward, tripping over something soft. When he looked down, his light fell on the outline of two small handprints pressed into the floor. Fresh. Wet, as if someone had just been there. He ran. Out the door, into the dying light. He didn't stop until he reached his car. When he finally looked back, he saw movement in the upstairs window, a flicker of two shapes, standing side by side. One turned its head slowly toward him. He never went back. But a year later, the article he wrote was published posthumously, found on his desk unfinished. His notes ended with a final line, scribbled in haste: "There were never two sisters, only one who refused to die alone." No one knows exactly what happened to the historian after that. Some say he left town, too shaken to continue his research. Others whisper he disappeared, just like the Carters did, without a trace, leaving his car parked on the same road that once led to the old farmhouse. The engine was still running when they found it. The driver's seat was empty, and on the passenger side, resting neatly on a folded map of North Carolina, were two ribbons, one pink, one blue. The article he left behind spread quietly online, buried deep in obscure forums about American folklore and dark history. At first, readers treated it like fiction, another ghost story, another small-town myth. But a few noticed something strange. Every time someone downloaded the scanned police report attached to the file, a line appeared at the bottom of the document that wasn't there before. It read, "Do you remember which one you are?" The document would then vanish from their computer. For months, people tried to debunk it. Archivists said the report didn't exist. Local officials denied any record of the Carter family at all. But one librarian in the county courthouse, an old woman with clouded eyes, told a different story. She said every time they tried to erase the record, it came back. Different handwriting, same date, same line written in the margins: "She took me." The house itself finally collapsed in the late 90s after a lightning storm. The county cleared the remains, planted grass over the lot, and put up a small, "For sale" sign. No one ever bought it. Locals say animals won't cross the property line. Birds don't land there. And on certain nights, when fog rolls through the hollow, drivers who pass along Highway 74 say they see two girls standing by the willow stump. One pale as snow, the other just a little darker, like her reflection burned into the air. They stand perfectly still until you blink, then they're gone. But sometimes, if you look in your rearview mirror, you'll see one of them sitting in your back seat, watching you, lips barely moving, whispering the same words she whispered to her mother all those years ago. "Don't worry, Mama, she's not gone. She just learned how to stay." And that's the dark history the records won't tell you. The story of the twin sisters who switched and never switched back.